Thank you, everyone, for coming. I would like to introduce Reno Fire Chief Michael Hernandez.
Good afternoon. This community suffered a significant tragedy, disaster this past weekend, and as part of our efforts to ensure that we provide the most current and factual information to our constituents, we elected to have this press briefing to bring individuals up to speed on what has occurred and what we are currently doing. In essence, today, it is literally the day after the storm, and we have entered into a post-mitigation phase, or an after-action phase, if you will, where we are going to look at what we did, what was deployed, the timelines, and where can we improve. A lot of people participated in the mitigation of this, what I call a firestorm, and we need to remember that a lot of people were negatively impacted. And first and foremost, on behalf of Mayor Bob Cashell, who I spoke with early this morning, Vice Mayor Gustin and the entire City Council staff, as well as the Washoe County Commissioners, our hearts, prayers, and condolences go out to those families that did lose everything. And I got to stress, they left in the middle of the night with very few possessions, and they came back to nothing. So these are the facts as we know them. The fire was reported at exactly 12:22 a.m. It was reported as a small brush fire, and the Reno Fire Department responded with a single engine response, as is our protocol after fire season. Approximately 2 minutes later, at 12:24, the responding engine company, as well as the dispatchers, who had received multiple calls to the dispatch center reporting a fire, upgraded that call to a full alarm assignment. That includes 2 additional brush rigs and a battalion chief and 1 safety officer. At approximately 12:30, upon arrival, the first engine, Engine 5, reported approximately 20 to 30 acres aggressively burning, extremely high wind conditions, and asked for a third alarm response, which would include 3 additional brush engines, a structure engine, and an additional battalion chief. Our primary concern at the time was structure protection. Given the location of where the fire originated, it was off-road. It was not accessible by any vehicle, and crews would have literally had to walk down into the canyon and the ravine area to where this fire was growing. Within the first hour, mutual aid requests were initiated, and units were being dispatched by neighboring agencies. And again, this is the day after the storm, if you will. As we go on and do our analysis, we will be providing a list of agencies that did provide support for this response. By Friday evening, approximately 445 firefighters were on the line working to bring the fire under control, and by late Friday evening, crews had stopped the forward progress of the fire, given the fact that they were still aggressively firefighting in high wind conditions. By Saturday afternoon, weather conditions had changed significantly enough to allow for crews to begin to backtrack and extinguish hotspots and begin overhaul operations. Late Saturday evening, the fire was approximately 65% contained. Well into Sunday evening, those operations continued, and by late Sunday evening, the fire was 100% contained. We know that approximately 42 residential structures were impacted. 30 of those homes were completely uninhabitable, and a variety of homes received anywhere from marginal to moderate damage. A total of 1,946 acres burned. We had 1 firefighter that was injured, and we had dozens of firefighters as well as community residents that were impacted with flying embers because of the high winds during the first 24-hour period. Of interest is that we did apply for and receive an FMAG. This is a Fire Management Assistance Grant that is managed through the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The importance of that FMAG declaration will allow our community and all of the responders to receive reimbursements to help offset the cost of this event. With respect to the cause of the fire, we have ruled out 2 of the 3 possible causes. One was a homeless encampment. One was the possibility of teenagers that may or may not have been in that area. We believe, however, we have not confirmed that electrical power lines arcing due to the extreme high wind conditions may have had or may have been a direct cause of this fire. We have asked for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to assist us in confirming our final conclusion with respect to the cause of the fire, and they are doing that as we speak. Post-event actions. Again, as I mentioned, we are in the after event phase, if you will, the after action phase, where we are going to do a complete analysis with regards to what we did, who responded, how many responders were on the ground, where were they deployed, and our overall strategy. And I have to stress that this was not a typical wildfire incident. The fire was exhibiting extremely erratic fire behavior, that was not typical of a typical wildfire event where you could actually see the fire coming down the mountain. This was actually, we had wind-blown embers that were blowing anywhere from a quarter of a mile to a half mile to 3/4 of a mile downwind and creating problems for our responders. Our primary focus at this time is assisting local, state, and federal agencies in rehabbing some of our land that was impacted. Specifically, we are concerned about flooding, and we're also concerned about revegetation of some of the impacted areas so that we don't have this problem next year. A primary concern is that we do everything we can to mitigate any type of flooding runoff. We do anticipate some heavy weather this Thanksgiving, over the Thanksgiving holiday, to include snow, and we want to be able to mitigate any potential runoff issues that we may have. Lastly, there have been some questions with respect to some of our stations that may or may not have been browned out, specifically the station on Skyline. And I have to tell you, given the location of the fire, the extreme wind conditions that we had, and the heavy fuel loads, irrespective of the station staffing, whether it was open or closed, it would not have had an impact on the overall outcome of this fire. This fire quickly grew. It was an erratic fire, and whether that station was staffed or not would not have made an impact to the overall outcome of that fire. Lastly, the community has been incredible with respect to supporting the first responders, and we have to tell you, as the fire chief, I have to tell you that the support that we have received has been nothing short of incredible. And we'd like to thank our community, and we also need to remember that this event negatively impacted a substantial number of our residents, and we're keeping that in mind. Shortly, I'll introduce Vice Mayor Dan Gustin, and after that, Vice Mayor will introduce Police Chief Steve Pitts to speak to some of the law enforcement issues that are currently being undertaken and some concerns that he has. And after that, there will be just a few minutes for some questions and answers. And Michelle Anderson, our Public Information Officer, will be handing out a fact sheet that goes into greater detail with respect to resources, what we've done, and a snapshot summary of our response times. Thank you so much. The media partners have been instrumental in helping us convey our safety message and getting the message of what we have been doing. So you members of the media deserve a certain amount of recognition as well. So thank you for that. Vice Mayor.
Thank you all for showing up this afternoon on short notice, because as Chief Hernandez just said, you've been a vital part of this whole plan to combat what went on this last week, and I thank you for being here, because some of my remarks I think you can carry to the public and let them know some things that they may still be interested in. I first received a call about 3 o'clock in the morning on Friday. By the time I got to the first command center up in Caughlin Ranch, was set at Scolari's shopping center up there, the team had already assembled. Mr. Klinger, our city manager, Chief Pitts, Chief Hernandez, the mayor, others were there. And so the coordination and the immediate response of everybody in the community was phenomenal. I was surprised to see they were that well organized that early in the event, and they really got things taken care of early and assigned, and I think it helped us a great deal. Well, overall, our first priority is our residents, obviously. Those who were affected, those that had friends or whatever in the community, we need to make sure that they connect to the important resources that will help them during these very, very difficult times. Because if your house or your community was affected by the fire, it is very, very severe, obviously. So the City of Reno and the Reno Fire Department are partnering with the volunteers of the Community Emergency Response Team to man the phone lines. So if you need some information or you'd like to leave any calls or any messages at all, please call Reno Direct. That's 334-INFO, I-N-F-O. The number is 334-4636. Phone lines will be open from 8 to 5 in business hours, and you could leave messages, and they will be picked up when people are back in there, and they'll follow through on whatever the message that you left on the line. Or you can visit the website www.reno.gov/Caughlin-Fire or www.washoecounty.us for information. So there are a lot of sources, a lot of places that you can get information, and you can leave information for anybody. Also, residents still trying to connect with family members or family members trying to connect with friends, we are leaving the 211 number open. So you can go to that source. The 211 number for information will be provided and be left open. And then finally, as the chief said, and I know that you're all interested in knowing the different participating groups that helped to attack this fire and help the residents of the community. A complete list will be put together. You'll get that a little bit later. Like anybody, I don't want to leave anybody out at this point by mentioning a few names, but certainly there was help from California, from all throughout Nevada, and that list will be put together so you can help us not only tell the citizens, the residents, what's going on with the information I just gave you with the 211 number and the 334-INFO number, but also I'm sure that you'd want to put out the people that helped the people in the city of Reno, whoever they were, wherever they came from. That list will be made available shortly. And let me take time now to talk about the response and talk about law enforcement side of it, Chief Pitts.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking this afternoon on behalf of regional law enforcement, and I'm going to focus on really the scope of my discussion is going to be on two areas. It's the recovery phase as we move from recovery into mitigation in this incident, and then talk about some calls for service to give you some numbers and put things into context as it relates to law enforcement's responsibility during and post-incident. During the recovery phase, law enforcement's responsibility is to provide immediate law enforcement needs to the citizens, obviously, that were impacted, and our community at large. And this is not just to be focused on crime, ladies and gentlemen, but the quality of life issues in the various neighborhoods of the impacted area and the overall community safety as well. It's important for us to increase citizen awareness through public information, and I would reference the media release put out by the Sheriff's Department on Saturday that focused specifically with scams that are kind of oriented around contractors and insurance and charity organizations seeking donations to charities. Law enforcement activities and resources that begin to stabilize, and I use that word, I underscore that. We need to stabilize that area up there, and we need to develop a sense of safety and confidence in those that have been impacted. We are conducting a 24/7 analysis of all calls for service and any other regional events that we can predict that may impact the safety of our citizens residing in that area and our community as a whole. We are coordinating law enforcement outreach services that include victim services and trauma intervention teams to assist those that have been impacted. And we'll continue to work very closely with all of public safety and all of local government on the challenges we may face in the days ahead. I'd like to share just some calls for service numbers for you, and the window I'm talking about is from the beginning of the incident until noon today. The Reno Police Department and local law enforcement responded to 108 calls for service in that impacted area compared to 50 calls for service during the same date, well, really the same day, and time periods the week previously. Top calls for service in that area were alarms. There were 22 of those. Police medical assistance, 17. Traffic, 14. Area checks, 10. And that equates to about 60% of those 108 calls for service we feel were directly related to the emergency. We had 3 reported residential burglaries and 2 suspicious subject calls during this time frame. We have made no arrests related directly to this incident. During the emergency or rapid deployment phase of this incident, that's the initial couple of hours, that window of hope and opportunity. The initial estimates indicate that law enforcement personnel from this region, and it's from everybody in this region, to include people from Carson City and obviously NHP that came in, evacuated, rescued, and assisted in the relocation of approximately over 10,000 citizens from the impacted area. That's pretty significant. My closing comments will be very similar to the vice mayors and the chiefs. The hospitality many citizens impacted by this incident have demonstrated to the men and women of law enforcement working in this community has been impressive, and it's humbling. This is why the men and women in public safety do what they do. It is truly one of life's greatest blessings to serve others, and when we're in the midst of a storm, a firestorm like this, the community lets us know that they are standing shoulder to shoulder with us, and they will not leave us alone in this storm. Thank you very much.
We'll open it up to a couple questions. You'll raise your hand so I can call you out if you have them. Stop.
With the power lines, can you make the power lines so they don't arc? Would you be doing something wrong if they're arcing? Is there any, what I'm asking, is there no way to prevent power lines from arcing in a situation like this?
You know, I am really not in a position to answer that. That's more of an engineering, civil engineering type question, and so that you can. The question was, is there a way to prevent electrical lines from arcing? And frankly, I'm not in a position to answer that. That's more of an engineering type issue.
So the very first call that came in related to the Caughlin fire was at 12:22 a.m.
Correct. The first call that we received was around 12:22, and that's when we dispatched our unit.
I've heard some reports, not confirmed, that people had called about smoke earlier than 11 p.m., which I have not confirmed, just people talking.
Okay, and I'm not going to speak to any rumors or any internet speculation. Like I said, this is literally the day after the storm. We're entering an analysis phase, and we are going to pull the tapes, we're going to pull the CAD documents, and we're going to listen to see exactly when the call was reported. But we can say that we did dispatch our resources at 12:22. The call was upgraded at 12:24. At 12:30, when the first unit arrived, they realized they had a significant fire event, and they reacted appropriately and accordingly.
So you say 42 structures impacted, 30 destroyed, and then a number of structures moderately damaged. Anyone know how many were moderately damaged?
Well, and that, the question is, how do we determine whether a structure is moderately damaged or not? And therein lies the rub. We've got some buildings that received damage to the outside. We have buildings that had broken windows and burned curtains, but weren't, significantly burned to the inside the structure. So, we did have structures that were impacted by, directly impacted by the fire. However, they are in a position where they can be rehabbed. They can be, repaired, if you will. Our primary focus was the number of structures that became uninhabitable, and we know that to be 30.
You had been saying earlier that you knew this would be a multi-million-dollar impact. Some of those homes are probably worth millions of dollars. Have you got any better feel for that yet?
Well, we know that our initial cost estimate, and this is very preliminary, but we know that just on the fire response mitigation effort, we are close to about the $750,000 cost range. However, that number will increase, and that's why it's important that we applied for and received the FMAG. With respect to the total cost of this event, it will be significant. With respect to individual properties, impact to business, impact to the community, and the response effort is just going to be one component of that cost effort.
And so the FMAG, is partial reimbursement or full reimbursement?
It's a partial reimbursement. It's 75% of the cost directly attributed to responding to and mitigating this effort.
Last question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that flooding is going to be the next concern. You're concerned about the weather coming in.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about what sort of efforts you can do, or people at home can do to kind of protect their properties?
Well, right now, what we are doing, we are looking at the areas, specifically the smaller canyons and culverts and things like that were burned out, and we're trying to quickly identify those areas, because if we do have a rain event, we want to make sure that we can place some straw berms, if you will, and you see them along the side of the roads, where that if we do get runoff, it'll control the amount of runoff and the amount of soil erosion that occurs. And in fact, as we speak, that meeting is going on right now. We're identifying those areas. The different agencies are trying to determine who can quickly go out and lay out these berms. You know, we're obviously we're going to get snow, so there is an immediate concern. There's an intermediate concern with respect to what can we do in the next 60 to 90 days, and then there's a long-term concern with respect to reseeding, hydroseeding, so that we make sure that you know, come springtime, we get the correct growth that we want in these areas.
Okay, last question, Brian.
Station 11 was the very first engine to respond. Engine 5 from Station 11?
Engine 5 from Station 5
From Station
on Mayberry Street, correct, and that's a straight shot right into Caughlin Ranch.
Okay, Mayberry is the very first.
Yes.
And then Station 11 and 3 were the follow-up.
Station 3, Station 11, correct.
And then Sierra Front.
Sierra, actually, the Verdi station from Sierra Fire Protection District also responded.
Okay, I have a fact sheet for you guys.
Want to thank everybody.